Welcome to Princeton Premier as we introduce you to the Princeton football class of 2026, the guys that are going to be stepping on campus later this summer, later this August. I'm Cody Grushell. I'm joined by Princeton football head coach Bob Surace. Coach, we were talking before we popped on, and you mentioned it kind of feels like these guys are already here because you've been recruiting them for so long. Now you're finally going to get them here this summer. 25 players, 13 states represented. What are your thoughts on this class, and what goes into putting together a recruiting class at Princeton?
Yeah, no, we're obviously, some of these kids committed 2 years ago. So it just, once they do that, it feels like they're part of the team. They are part of the team at that point, and then they obviously get on campus, they do some things of that nature, and then we start camp. But yeah, some of the guys, it feels like, really, he's this class because it feels like he's been playing for us because the relationship's that long. I think going into it, and every year there's certain needs. Like last year, when you lose DeLon Stallworth, Trevor Forbes, Matt Winston, Sultan Shabazz, on and on, Christian Brown, like you're not gonna, when you bring a big class in like that, and it's starting as freshmen, those guys are 3 and 4 year starters. You're not going to bring in a lot of guys. So when they graduate this big group and other guys that are pushing to develop, or like Mike Rutland, the leader of the team, you're going to bring in a big class, to develop that way. So there's some intentionality with needs. For the most part, is who fits us, right? Build these relationships, not only talent. The Tampa Bay Lightning just lost in the Stanley Cup, but it's their 3rd straight year. And they always talk about picking the right people, right? Pick the right people. And when you pick the right people that have enough talent, you have a better chance of success. And I think our staff has done a great job with that. And last year was a little different when we had the recruiting talks because we didn't really meet all those guys. Because of COVID, they weren't able to get here. This group at some point got to come to camp, got to come to games, got to do things. So the relationship building, even though it started later than everybody would like, ended up getting there.
Let's jump right into it. We'll start with the offense. I guess it makes sense to start at the quarterback position, and you've got 2 quarterbacks coming in this incoming class. Kai Colon from Middletown, New York. Blaine Hippa played his high school football later in his career in Arizona, but hails from Hawaii. That's been a spot that your coaching staff's gone back to. 2 players that sort of have a similar skill set, and I know you compared them kind of like a Cole Smith.
Yeah, they're both kind of like Cole. And you go back to, and after we said that, in 2010, 2011, they were freshmen in 2011. We had a righty in Connor Michelson, who was a good athlete, strong arm, and a lefty in Quinn Epperly. And Quinn, same thing. And both those guys were football junkies. Both those guys had accuracy that way. Blaine, when you watch his film, he's not as broad-shouldered. Quinn Epperly was a big guy, but he has a lot of Quinn in him, the way he processes his accuracy. And Kai, we had Kai at camp. He didn't miss. His accuracy, like we could have put a really small target out there and he would have put it right through there. And they're guys that are really smart. They're good athletes. I wouldn't call them John Lovett. They won't be used like John Lovett that way. That's not their style. It's a little bit more, they're accurate, but they can run, kind of like Cole.
When you go into building a recruiting class and you look at the quarterback position, just based on your offense, your program, your track record, do you go into it saying, hey, we'd really like to have some different skill sets?
Yeah, well, so if I was recruiting for Ohio State or Alabama, I would say, here's the top 3 kids in the country. I'm going to get one of these, right? With the academics, with things like that, that narrows it down. And so our pool we're looking at is going to be a little bit different than Ohio State's that way, or Alabama's. Let's get the best quarterback out there. If it happens to be Chad Kanoff, we're going to drop back with him or Kevin Davidson all the time. If it happens to be Cole, we're going to do things that are a little bit more balanced. If it happens to be, somebody like a Lovett, we're going to do more things that utilize athleticism. But let's get the best player. And the one thing with our offense, and it's been great when we throw it 50 times a game. It's been great when we throw it 40 times a game. It's been great when we throw it 30 times a game and run it 50 times. It's been outstanding through this length of time. That way we can adapt the plays, but let's get the guy that can really play. And, both these guys, Blaine, I don't want to come across like, use the word casualty, like true casualty, right? I'm being a little bit utilizing this term broadly on this. But, the term COVID casualty came up in athletics, that a kid misses an entire year and gets out of sight, out of mind. Blaine was a highly, highly regarded Hawaiian.
You're talking about with Hawaii not playing that year?
Yeah, and Hawaii did not play his junior year and kind of fell off the map. Had to go to Chandler, Arizona, right? His family moves there, and they bring in 3 other Division I type quarterbacks. And he could have went other places that they gave him the job. He decided to go there and win the job, and he did, and had a great year. And that's one of the top programs in the country. Kai kind of had to do the same thing. He had to go to Paramus Catholic for a year when New York didn't play, and he kept himself on the radar, that way, which was why we were a little bit earlier with him. But, Kai trains in New Jersey. He's right on the border, and I've kind of been following him since he was a young kid. And to see his progress and then see it in person at camp last year, it was a real easy decision.
Sticking with the offense, not a ton of what you would call offensive skill position players in this recruiting class. 1 wide receiver, 1 tight end. Charlie Rossi, your receiver. Bryce Williams, your tight end. 2 guys who are going to have a chance to come in and make an impact.
Yeah, and there was some intentionality in that. We have a couple of 5th years at both those positions. We have a young man at wide receiver coming back that played as a freshman, Tamatoa, from a Mormon mission. So quantity was not going to be really important. Let's get 1 or 2 guys at receiver and a tight end, and let's get the highest quality on that. And, Charlie Rossi, you watch his film or you see him in person in high school, you're going to say, Berm. Somebody who was here when I first got here might say Roman Wilson. But short, strong, super, super quick, and incredibly competitive. Dad's one of the best high school coaches, great program in Pennsylvania that way, really smart. But he fits us, whether it's, Roman to Tiger Besh to Berm to JoJo and, the AJ Barbers and guys who've played our slot. They have these unique traits, and he has them. Even better, he PG down the road at Lawrenceville this past year, and I'll be in town on Nassau Street, and I'll have a Princeton football on or something, and hey, I was a professor at Lawrenceville. Charlie Rossi is an amazing, to make an impact, you're only on that campus. He was only there for about 9 months. And the people there just love them. These guys are leaders. When you go into their schools, they're leaders in their communities, leaders in their school. That's the type of kid we're getting. Bryce Williams was one of the, probably of all this group, and there's a couple DBs that were offensive players as well in high school. I couldn't figure Bryce out. Take away the offensive line, take away interior D-line and maybe corner, he played every other position in his high school. And 1 week he might be a quarterback, the next week he might be a receiver, he's playing safety, he's playing linebacker, he's rushing off the edge. He played about 15 different positions. So figuring him out was a challenge, and it really took a little bit longer. When we really started connecting with him, it was, we're going to want you in Princeton, but you got to be able to accept you're going to be coming as an athlete, and we'll work it out together where you're going to play. As he's, matured physically and getting bigger and stronger, he's that athletic prototype H-back tight end that's Bobo-esque, that's been so successful with us. And, I think he's not going to have the time on task that maybe a Bobo had that just played tight end for 4 years of high school, or, it's a little bit more Graham Adamitis-esque, that where Graham was a quarterback in high school. his development may take a little bit longer, but what a great athlete for that position.
Is there value in having guys who have played multiple positions just from maybe they see the game from a different lens?
I love multi-sport guys. I love versatile players, because that means they got more upside. If all you do, and some of the guys, that's what they do, it's okay, but all you do is lift weights, you might be a little more maxed out. So your ability, when we watch you, better be higher coming into it than a guy who's doing all these different things that Coach Willis is going to have so much fun with Price. I mean, Charlie Rossi was a three-sport guy, right? Coach Flynn, you're going to have a lot of fun molding the clay as opposed to, you get it and you just got to kind of refine it a little bit.
Moving on to the running back position. 2 running backs in this class, and this is a spot where you mentioned a couple of areas where your team's going to be a little bit young just because of the losses to graduation. You lose a Colin Eady, you lose a Trey Gray. In comes Ryan Butler, Darian Murphy. This is a position where your top 2 returning leading rushers were both freshmen last year, so 2 players that are going to have a chance to potentially have an impact.
Yeah, and Brandon Cuevas, and our coaches even well before that, they've just done a great job understanding that a running back, in the way myself and James Perry, when we first got here, saw the position, you got to be able to do multiple things. When you're in Pop Warner, a running back runs the ball, and that's the skill. And very often in high school, if you got a good running back, why throw it to him? Why have him block, right? You're going to give him the ball. But these guys are at programs that utilized their ability to be three-way players, to do all 3 things. And you'd see it, it was just really fun to see. Ryan, I feel like we've known since he was really young. He's been coming to our games. He's, down the road at
Bergen Catholic.
That way. And Darian, a guy who interned with us, Vince Gonzalez, was at a school and called us up, at one point and said, hey, got a guy that's, top student in the school, has interest. And both those guys, you don't have to be very smart, right, to say we're going to recruit these 2 guys. These 2 guys are just so talented. Their film is off the charts, but they're also the leaders of their team. They're the guy. Bergen Catholic's got a whole bunch of guys that are going to play, at other great schools. And when the game was on the line the last 2 years, the ball was in Ryan Butler's hands. Same thing with Darian. The ball is in their hands. And with good players around them, that's the type of talent they must have in terms of that. And they're leaders. They're just workers, and they're going to be so much fun. And I wouldn't say there's a little bit like Darian body type resembles Edie, the forward lean and gracefulness as a tall guy resembles Edie. Butler's about 225 pounds and just powerful and explosive. There's a little bit of Keith Elias in the way he finishes his runs and how explosive he is, where I think, Darian's a little different body type and has a lot of Colin. And, man, if they live up, I'm not trying to put the pressure on them, but to something similar to those guys in style, we'll be in good shape.
And I've imagined you've got to feel pretty good going out and bringing in guys who have had success at the level they have. You have a Texas High School Player of the Year and the leader in all-purpose yards all-time at Bergen Catholic.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to recruit every school, right? If there is a guy who has the requisite character, grades, and talent, we're going to recruit them. But yeah, like a guy coming from Bergen Catholic that has been coached so well, a guy coming from Floresville, that guy who coached with me coached him, right? That was here at Princeton. You feel really good about those guys. We're going to get to some other guys, but Iona Prep, right? Cathedral. We're talking about the best team in those states year in, year out. And so, look, we're not only going to recruit St. Augustine Prep, right? Great school, great program. That's not the only school we're going to recruit, but it is a nice bonus when they're coming from places that are so well coached and the schools have prepared them academically.
Well, you led us into the final slot on offense. Your offensive line, I know a position that's near and dear to your heart as a former NFL offensive line coach and a former All-Ivy center here at Princeton. 4 players, you alluded to a couple of them, Scott Becker, Iona Prep, Cooper Coors out of Cathedral in Indianapolis. Justice Muser, Jaden Wetterburn, one of 4 New Jersey natives in this class.
Yeah, 13 years, and I get that segue every once in a while. I get that down, right? Yeah, I'll start with Scott. We got some strong guys on our team, right? Kevin Bruce on defense, Zach Zambrano, Nick Hilliard. These are like all-time strong guys. Coach Verbett's been here 37 years. Scott's going to come in there very similar to them, right? Every once in a while, my son will show me a tweet, and Scott's gone viral, right, for something he's done in the weight room. I think one time he was like deadlifting 1 million pounds, and some kid like walked out of the weight room as, probably a freshman, like, oh my God, I don't know what I got myself into. What separates Scott is he's so flexible, right? We've had strong guys, smart guys, but we really, have to temper once they get here. You don't need to get any stronger. You got to get more flexible. Scott's coming here strong and flexible, so he's got some growth he can still get in his strength. And man, is he leader of the team, tough, everything you're asking for. And you walk in, in the winter to Iona Prep, or you talk to their coaches, and they're just beaming. Like, that's the type of kid he is. And he's an interior guy. Cooper Coors from Cathedral. One of my, Eric Dryban was a great lineman here, graduated in 1986. And Eric really keeps up with Cathedral. And I remember him, probably when Cooper was young, I know it was Cooper was younger, hey, keep an eye on this kid. So kind of wrote it down and, start the process when it's illegal. And we start recruiting Cooper, and, he's everything you'd imagine. He's tall, he's athletic. We typically, and we've made a run on our outside guys being long, lean, athletic, and they gain weight. Henry Burr types, right? Mitch Swigert's, we've had such great success with those guys that probably most of our outside guys fit that in terms of that. Cooper is, he's really natural in his movements. Again, coming from a school, he is really well coached, and he's going to be a fun guy to see develop here. Justice was later, and with all the ins and outs of what these kids have been through and COVID, there were some guys we identified early. There were some who were falling through the cracks, and credit our assistant coaches to find guys, because this is a guy who was 6'6", to probably 20 as a junior, and then now he's up to 245. He's got this big frame, he moves his feet, and Coach Zarkowski is all over him that way. Mike Mendenhall, the area coach, just really, Coach Strace, take a look at him. Bob, take a look at this guy. And the more you watch, the more you're like, this guy fits us. Right, he kind of looks like Swigert, which Swigert was in high school. He's got to develop. Mitch was amazing as development, but has a lot of those same qualities. And then Jaden Wetterburn, he's from Glassboro, which is a stone's throw from where I grew up in Millville. Reclassed and went to the Petty School, which was awesome. Like, it just helps I think it's going to help acclimate him in a lot of ways academically, but he reclasses and there's no football at the Petty School that year, right? They reclasses and he's online, and it just, to show what type of kid he is, to bear down and do everything he needed to do academically, he was the opposite of what we usually take, right? He's the big guy that really had to define his body better and really restructure it so he got to move his feet quicker. And he comes to camp last summer, and you're like, oh, he can knock guys off the ball. He's got versatility. He is super smart. And you just connect with him that, he's going to be that, kind of like a David Hoffman, that big, athletic, road grader, offensive, but probably a guard. Hoff played back and forth, guard and tackle early in his career, but fits that. And even better, he goes to the Petty School, right? Glassboro is a lot like Millville. It's a long ways from being the Petty School academically, or an elite private, prep school that way. There's an adjustment there. He is Prince Charming in the school play. He's the lead of their school play. His mom's sending videos to us, and it just shows like, oh my goodness, this guy is going to come to Princeton and take it by storm. Like you love this kid, and who knows, maybe he'll be Khaleel Bryant and be in the school plays here, and wind up doing things that involve that. But maybe he just gets to sing a lot in front of us, so it'd be pretty cool.
Before we move on to defense, one specialist in this class, you graduate Ryan McNeil, so Logan Rager comes in. You have young kickers. You've got an all-conference punter in Will Powers, but you do have a vacancy in that long snapper spot.
Yeah, no, and we like to have two in these positions, right? Because I've been there with one and sweating, and the NFL you only have one, and there's really, when you only have one, you're one play away, one bump, one positive test away from disaster that way. And Logan, I'm not a big thing we'll say as coaches, do your own work, right? You see this all the time, coaches, even in the hiring. Let's hire a guy to win the press conference. And then 2 years later, they got to hire another guy to win the press conference. And 2 years later, hire the best candidate, right, in terms of that. Winning the press conference, nobody cares about the press conference 2 days later. Winning the recruiting rankings thing doesn't help if it's not the right guys. And that's where you see some of the programs that have won a lot consistently. They're not only getting guys that are higher up in the rankings, but they're getting the right guys that way. But Logan, with long snappers, they do all kinds of competitions, and it's judged, in front of everybody. Where you go to camp and you're an offensive lineman, we're evaluating everything you do, and you're teaching and you're doing all that. You're a long snapper. It's how fast was it? What was the accuracy? It's not subjective, that way. And so he goes to all these competitions and he wins every single one of them. And his passion for long snapping, is just second to none. He has a way of going viral with, knocking a top off a soda bottle and the bottle stands up. And, I think it's pretty cool, right? It has nothing to do with how well he'll do, other than, he loves what he's doing. He has passion. And we like guys who love football, right? I love guys who love football, who are outstanding kids, who want to do great things with their lives that way. So we're very, this is what we want. Does this guy love football? Does this guy want to go on and do great things and help out others and service and all that? And that's the type of guy we're getting. Well, Logan, he just will come up. He's very creative with these really cool viral things, which is neat.
As you go out and you build a class and you're on the road and you're recruiting and you're talking to parents and you're talking to high school football players, how much of an advantage is it to have the consistency on the coaching staff that you have? Because you look at the coaching staff that was here last year, at least as far as coordinators and position coaches, those are the guys that are going to be back this fall.
Yeah, I think, you're not coming to Princeton just because of the coaches, right? They may love me, but if I was at a school that was mediocre academically, they wouldn't come visit. They might love me, but, hey, nice to meet you, coach, right? That way. There's other reasons, but football is important to you, right? There's other good academic schools they can go to. And in the end of the day, stability is important, right? I'm going through it. I just went through it with my daughter, going through it with my son. And that part of it's important because a coach is going to be, whether people understand this or not, you're going to be the go-to person when things are tough, when they need support, when things are going well, when you want to, that's who they're high-fiving. You play such an integral role in their lives that way, that part's important. So when the head coach it's his alma mater, it's his wife's alma mater, kids are growing up on this campus. It's a beautiful campus. It's the people you're working with. 3 athletic directors, one of them who I knew, from college, the one right now just knocks your socks off, Gary, who hired me, Gary Walters, just people who are so passionate about this place. You walk down the hallway, Fred Samara, you know, in terms of that, you know, especially my first Pete Krill would come out to practice, right? These are people that you just have so much respect for, you know, that way. So I think there's people who in recruiting, they need to put on a sales job, or sometimes, you know, maybe they're not authentic. I think when our coaches go on the road, I hope, you know, they're authentic. They know when it's coming from me. I lived it, I breathe it. You know, there's so much that I love about it.
Switching our attention to defense, let's work front to back. 4 players coming in as part of this defensive line group: Bakari Edwards, Charlie Lingen, Tanner Mayrins, and Aaron Richards, in a position where you can never have too much depth.
Yeah, no, it's important for us to get a versatile group with that. And if we count the rush backer, because Aaron might be a rush, he might be a defensive end as he's growing, but you know, we really emphasized 2-way D linemen in this group, guys that can play the run and rush the passer. Sometimes we're a little bit more niche on that we're going to, you know, hey, we just got to get a pass rusher here, right? This guy can come in immediately. Cole Aubrey get on the field and have some sacks early in his career that way. Or, hey, we need a run stopper. We need Carter Christopher to go in A-gap to A-gap and win. These guys, you know, are just really versatile guys. Bakari, we had a camp, and you know, he was going up against some really good players, and his twitch, meaning his quickness and explosiveness combination, was off the charts. And he has a really strong punch. And you know, I thought his effort level that entire day was so sky high, and you know, reminded me of some guys here that we've had in the past that have been, you know, his pass rush reminded me a lot of Khaleel Bryant, who was slippery, and you know, a guy who had, you know, 4 or 5 sacks as an interior D lineman as he got older. But Khaleel, when he came to us, was 215 pounds, you know, and you know, Bakari's going to come in a lot bigger than that. Charlie and Tanner were both later in the process. Credit Verbs. Verbs is never going to rush things. And D linemen often develop really late, right? You know, there's going to be the freak that is 14 years old and gets offered by Georgia, and you know, but most of D linemen, the later you can go with them, the more you can see them develop. And you know, Charlie, again, he's another guy. His junior fall was disrupted by COVID. There wasn't a lot of film. He was skinny. You know, he was, I don't know, 185, whatever. He was a leaner guy that got strong and utilized that time to really develop. His hands are outstanding. He has a strong punch. He's got a lot of, you know, the proverbial, like B. Mel Kiper here, upside in terms of that. And I think Tanner follows that. Tanner was like more of a basketball player than he was a football player. He was just 6'4", you know, I think last year he played about 220 pounds. And Verb showed me basketball film. And, you know, we're going to talk a little bit of Sixers, right? But Charles Barkley used to be able to, you know, on a rebound, his twitch to get a rebound, you know, sometimes he'd shoot the ball, miss it, and still get the offensive rebound that way off his own shot. And I'm watching Tanner and his ability, his twitch to do that, and I was like, whoa. And you go back and watch his film for a guy that's so raw technically, but has so much ability that his body, he kind of looks like, body-wise, like a Catapano, this longer, you know, V-shaped body, but Cat was so much further along technically. And with Verbs and how well he, you know, nobody develops D linemen better than Verbs, that he's going to have so much fun in the next year, you know, seeing this guy grow. And said Aaron's a guy that Coach Mendenhall saw down at a different camp down in Tennessee, and you know, we get him up on campus, and you know, he's just a guy. He's so Sam Wright-like, and his ability, his first step, and his ability to bend, and then when he needs to, he'll one-arm bull. But Sam, early in his career, didn't have a whole lot of moves, but got on the field, especially as a sophomore, because he had a first step, He could bend, and he had, for a guy that's shorter, Sam had really long arms and could get his arms on somebody when they gave him the chest because they were afraid of the speed move. As time goes on, Aaron's just gonna flourish because those three things are just so important to being an elite pass rusher. And he's for a guy that's probably my height. He plays so much, bigger because of his length. So it's going to help him. And as he puts on weight, he'll probably be a D end. We'll figure out where he's at next year.
Yeah, for these guys that are 2 and 3 sport athletes, how much do you look at their tape from the sport that's not football, and how much can you take away from that?
So in the winter, once our season ends and we go on the road, so the month of December and January, when it's not a dead period, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to basketball games. I'm going to wrestling meets. If a kid plays a second sport, I watch Kai Cologne play basketball, right? I'm in there and I'm watching him compete. I'm seeing his leadership, right? In a sport that's not his primary sport, he probably hadn't picked a basketball up until about 3 days. His team was really good and everything else before that game. The fans, because they don't know anybody, but he was the quarterback of the football team, the fans are getting on him, stick to football, that kind of thing. And to see his poise. And you notice, how does a guy interact with his teammates? You see so many things with these guys that are multi-sport athletes. And, I love it. It's harder and harder. It's getting really hard to do multiple sports nowadays just because football's year-round, baseball's year-round, basketball's year-round, wrestling's year-round. You got to be so exceptional to play multiple sports at the good high school, the higher high school level, that it just, that these guys got some special qualities when they do that.
Taking a look at the linebacker position, Will Beasley, Sekou Rowland, Marco Scarano, 3 players at the linebacker position, 2 interior, 1 outside linebacker. Give us the breakdown on this group.
Yeah, so start with Beasley. And, the Johnson family ran out of children to send to us. So
Our condolences.
I think, unfortunately, but I think Coach White went out to try to find an adopted Johnson. And that's Will Beasley. The guy just makes plays. And he plays with energy. He's the leader of the team. Coach White and Coach Czar, after our season, went and saw him play in the state championship game. And he's got a broken hand. He had 15 tackles. He was up for best player, defensive player in the state of Michigan. And Liam, was it Liam or Jimmy? One of them had 5 sacks in the state championship game for St. Joe's Prep, one of the Johnsons. And it just, my notes was I felt like I was watching a Johnson. When I went back and looked at my notes, when I first saw him on film, I feel like I'm watching a Johnson. And I think for a linebacker, Will might not know that, but there's not much better praise at this place in the last 7-8 years is that style fits us. Sekou, on the other hand, if you think of the quickness and agility of a Fasadi, of a Rohan Hilton, of Anthony Corbin right now, the ability to impact space, because they're so quick that when a team does an RPO, they can get back to the pass. When they pull it, that linebacker can get in the passing lane. And the number of pass breakups, Daniel Beard. Daniel Beard had 8 pass breakups last year as a Will linebacker? That's more what he's doing. He's a guy that can play, run, and pass in terms of that, and has incredible instincts that way. And Marco Scarano, I want to say one of his coaches put out was thanking people from his school, and it was this is the best leader in my 37 years or whatever I've ever been around. He was Player of the Year in his league, which is a league filled with whatever Power 5 guys that chose to go that route. He is very fast, very athletic. I think in the olden days he might be a strong safety, but with where the game's changed in coverage, he's a guy you put in the flat area He'll be an impact special teams player just by the way. I think all three of these guys, are going to have the linebacker position has to impact special teams, and they fit what we're looking for that way. But they're all high energy guys. Juice, that's our hashtag. It's not, the juice that, the baseball steroid era. It's the energy and attitude, that juice. And those guys bring that type of juice.
Final position group, more than a quarter of this recruiting class, defensive backs, 7 of the 25. And that's a spot where you had 6 seniors last year. And it seems like just yesterday we were talking about that group that was seniors last year when they were freshmen and sophomores and they were sort of forced into action with injuries. And that definitely benefited your team last year in the run to the Ivy League title. 7 coming in, and that's a position where you'll have a lot of turnover just due to those losses to graduation.
Yeah, no, we were very intentional about that. When you got the Trevor Forbes and DeLon Stallworths and Christian Browns and Saltons and Winstons and all those guys, you're not going to bring in 4 or 5 guys every year because they're never going to get on the field, right? You're going to need time to develop them, and then they can become on special teams and everything else. But to bring in 5 a year, the young guys aren't going to develop. So it's really allowed us to develop some of the guys who had great springs this year, some of the guys who, when there were some injuries last year, helped us out and got on the field. But this is a really strong group. And the versatility that these guys have, I think is going to pay off. Noah Billings, coming from Parish Episcopal, great high school out in Texas. He and Solomon Williams, I think, are a lot alike in terms of they have, and Solomon's at the alphabetically at the back of this list, but to talk about those two guys, they just have great instincts. They're so Trevor Forbes-like or Phil Bia-like in that they play the game with great instincts, great intelligence, great communication. You can tell they have that it factor as a leader. Trevor got on the field early in his career because he walked in and nothing was too big for him. There was a poise. These guys are very good tacklers. They kind of do everything really, really, really well. Like you think about, these guys, there's guys that flash, right? And they're good, but they're not consistent. These guys are kind of what fits us. Think about, and you've done this for a long time. We don't give up a lot of big plays on errors, right? It's very rare there's a coverage bust that way. And with good athletes, with good instincts, with ball skills to create turnovers, interceptions, both those guys add a little extra juice. Parish Episcopal, Carmel, great high school football. That way. Solomon's dad's an NFL coach, been in the NFL for about 20 years. As a defensive back, coach, he's now the D coordinator of the Bears that way. And he grew up, just like Charlie Rossi on a high school field, he grew up on NFL fields, and, you can see that in his play. There's a maturity that, as a coach, you really appreciate. Glenny Cross, he'll probably be the hardest one for me and Coach Henderson to figure out. Man, you watch his tape once, and you're like, this guy is a safety. You watch it again, you're like, he looks like DeLon Stallworth. I took all these notes, and and then you see it again, you're like, he's like Shabazz. Like, he just has this versatility.
This is a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, but for a freshman, you want to let him get settled in somewhere. And this summer, and maybe it'll take a couple days of camp, let's get him acclimated. Because the great thing about DBs, Cover 2 was Cover 2 when they were in Pop Warner in the 5th grade. Cover 3 was Cover 3. Cover 1 was Cover 1. Cover 0 is Cover 0. Quarters is quarters. They don't have to learn a new language. When you come in here and play tight end, everything's new, right? You have to learn a new language. The acclimation for a DB from a language is a little easier, so getting him up to speed. But man, is he he just makes plays all over the field. Nasir Hill, opening game, this year, my son's playing St. Augustine, and I think Nasir, every time it was 3rd and 15, they threw him an 18-yard comeback, like on defense. They moved his positions, and he's covering running backs out of the backfield. The game before, he's in the secondary, deep, playing deep coverage. it's almost like they put him here to be a nickel for us. The way he can bounce back and forth, cover deep, cover shallow. I think, he might be a little easier to pinpoint just watching him play, his instincts, big, strong body type like Dorian Williams when he came in. And, it's a great program. Joe Bonchak, St. Augustine, got on the field, pretty early in his freshman year as on the special teams. Great, incredibly well coached. They're deep in the playoffs every year, and Nas is going to compete, really early. Desean Jones is coming from Sierra Canyon, another great football program, great academic school, and he is really athletic. Just the way he moves, flips his hips, and there's, almost, Christian Brown was so pretty to watch in his back pedal and movements, and Desean on his high school film, he's got maturing to do physically and all that, but as a young guy, reminds me a lot of a young Christian, that way, and that he's so easy in his movements. Jalen Newman's like that for us, just so easy in his movements in terms of that. Jaden Jones, Santa Margarita. He's another guy who's an offensive guy. I probably, hopefully, means, the reason they're playing DB isn't because they couldn't catch, right? These guys were really productive offensive players that way. But Jalen's, go back to like the Kamal Brown, the big skinny. That's kind of what he is. Long arm, long body type, can really run, can catch the ball. Everybody in the country was looking at Kamal as a wide receiver, and I was like, DBs are so hard to find. When this guy gets the techniques down, he's going to, and Kamal started as a freshman that way. Jalen's got a similar skill set, right, as he really hones in on the skills. And like Kamal, he's got that personality that you just love. Like the room lights up when he comes in that way. And then Taj, Taj was Offensive Player of the Year at Loyola. He was Offensive Player of the Year in his conference at Loyola. But it's the same thing. He is, to me, a guy that making this transition. He played both ways in terms of that, making this transition to get a guy with his athleticism, his explosiveness, his speed, and you look at some of the safeties, we've had, it's almost like a Rutland build where Mike Rutland is just strong and smart, and, we've had, Dorian Williams, as I mentioned earlier. Dorian was, a running back in high school, kind of like Taj. You get these, Trevor Forbes, running back in high school, these guys that have this explosiveness with the ball in their hands, almost always translates to being really good in the defensive backfield.
Well, that's the incoming recruiting class, 25 guys. I've got to imagine the most exciting day of the year for you is report day and the day they actually get on the field.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the most exciting day for them too. Going to college, going to a college like Princeton, this is what they've wanted for so long. And when their high school years end, they have something to look forward to. It's hard to be a high school player and play Division I football. So their high school careers end with a state title like Bergen Catholic or whatever. And now you got this next step. And there's a nervousness, a concern, there's an excitement, there's, all those things go through your mind. You want to be part of this brotherhood. And then you get up here and you're just welcomed with open arms by this great group in the locker room, and coaches are excited. You guys are doing, first thing they do is like the video board headshots. So they're kind of like, oh man, like this is going to be fun. And then we, first day of camp, it's 100 degrees and we're running sprints. It's maybe not all video headshots, but I do think there's a lot of different emotions that they'll go through, and most of it's can't wait. Like I DM these guys all the time and stay in touch all summer and spring. I can't wait to get there, Coach. Coach, when's report date? Like they're itching to be here.
Coach, appreciate you peeling back the curtain and introducing us to the 25 guys that are joining the program this fall. I guess this summer. Can't wait. Mid-August, they'll be here before we know it.
I can't wait to.